here we have a serious problem. America is addicted to oil.
This is the last great source of oil on the planet.
Global warming, toxic sludge on a scale that's unprecedented anywhere in the world.
Each barrel that is produced here in North America among friends is one less barrel from the Middle East.
Desperate to wean itself off Middle East oil, the West wagers its future on the Alberta tar sands. The stakes are global, the battle intense, the outcome uncertain. It comes down to one simple idea. Whoever controls the tar sands controls the world.
The only thing I can assure you won't happen is what everybody thinks will.
Canada used to be a bit player in the global oil market, with a reserve of just 5 billion barrels of conventional crude. But deep in the backwoods of Alberta is a buried treasure. Under an area the size of Florida, 174 billion barrels of oil up for grabs. What looks like dense topsoil is actually black gold, enough unconventional crude to last 100 years. Trapped in the sand is a tar-like substance, once dismissed as bottom-of-barrel petroleum, expensive to extract, dirty to refine. But with the US craving energy security and new superconsumers like China and India starving for oil, Canada's unconventional crude has become conventional.
Alberta oil sands are a major player in the world energy scene. That awareness has come recently. We forecasted it many years ago, but it's now very real.
With tar sands development quadrupling over the next decade, the world wants in, and Alberta is open for business. But are they driving a hard bargain or selling Canadian sovereignty at liquidation prices?
You can't build the world's largest energy project, or the world's largest capital project for that matter, and not change the nation. Canada now has this image as some kind of emerging energy superpower, and so more and more the politics of the country have to deal with oil and money from oil and the environmental problems that come, in particular, from dirty oil. And the tar sands has implications for every aspect of life.
The rise of Canada as an energy superpower is tied to the collapse of America's sense of invincibility. The American dream had been fueled by a steady supply of cheap, available oil. But on September 11, 2001, everything changed. Oil supply and pricing had been stable for 20 years. Now the only thing certain is uncertainty. Middle East oil is tainted by terrorism, and oil goes from a simple commodity to the key component of Western security.
After terrorism and a nuclear or biological weapon, energy security is the number 3 threat, I think, after that for our security in the United States and, for that matter, Canada.
Locking down a secure supply of oil becomes an American obsession. But increasingly, oil is a closed market, with 90% of conventional reserves controlled by nationally owned companies. These companies, as in Venezuela and Russia, often have their own geopolitical agendas.
Large majority of those reserves that are nationally owned are in countries that are somewhat unstable, sometimes real unstable, and potentially unfriendly to the West and the United States particularly.
America, desperate for a carbon fix, follows anyone who guarantees a steady supply. U.S.-Canadian dual citizen Paul Michael Wiebe wants to be the dealer, hooking American buyers on Canadian product.
We are in a world of transition after 9/11, And we are in a world of transition in the global oil market. And I believe Canada has a leading role to play.
Since the Iraq War began in 2003, the price of oil has spiked 400%. The overheated market gives Weeby a platform to preach the virtues of tar sands oil.
Oil sands have been the stepchild of the global oil market for decades and decades. They've been marginalized, bastardized, if you will. In fact, unconventional oils are emerging as a dominant force in the petroleum market.
At the oldest privately owned bank in America, Weeby assures investors that tar sands crude, though nearly 10 times more expensive to extract than Middle East oil, is a bargain.
That security of supply as a consequence of 9/11 trumps cost of supply. And that is a fundamental shift.
3 weeks after its invasion of Iraq, the U.S. government decrees that tar sand should be counted as part of Canada's conventional energy supply, propelling it from 21st to 2nd on the list of national oil reserves.
Alberta now, from a standing start, effectively, it's approaching the production level of Kuwait. By 2045, the volume coming out of the oil sands in Alberta alone will approach 11 million barrels a day. That's a stunning figure. It's an overwhelming figure. And that will continue for a century.
If Alberta caters exclusively to America, it can satisfy their appetite for 10 million barrels of imported oil a day for the next 100 years. The twilight of Middle East oil could signal the dawn of a new golden age, fueled by the tar sands. But at what cost?
Well, good morning, Fort McMurray. It's Diana Lankin here with you. 7:30 and 3 degrees downtown. Traffic is already starting to back up, heading out to site. So please be patient if you're heading out there. And if you got a traffic tip, give me a call, 791-CJOK.
At the epicenter of Alberta's oil explosion is Fort McMurray, a rough-and-ready boomtown that grinds to its own internal rhythm. 3 shifts a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. A steady steamroll of 30,000 workers from around the world, including China, Venezuela, the Philippines, and across Canada.
Fort McMurray has got the feel of Hong Kong about it. I mean, everyone is working all the time, 24/7. And everyone's got some kind of dream. And their dream, funny enough, none of their dreams end in Fort McMurray.
McMurray exerts a magnetic pull, attracting fortune seekers, especially from Newfoundland. They may have come by chance, but they stay by necessity, making McMurray Newfoundland's 3rd largest city, with 25,000 islanders settling here. Moving from the rock to the sands makes one occasionally crave a taste of home. At Cozy Corners, one can get true comfort food, Newfie hash served by a waitress with a familiar accent.
How you doing, bud?
Small food for the arteries this morning.
Tired of waiting for work, Jeff Wiscombe left St. John's 8 years ago, coming to the place Islanders call Fort McMoney.
Do you like it, James?
He and his wife Gail expected to get rich quick, then return home.
Try it.
But with the birth of James, their roots here have deepened.
Well, half the time for Christmas, usually every second year we go home. But now we got him, we'll probably spend more time here, like in his house and his Christmas tree. The big thing with Newfoundlanders especially, that they're drawn to where they grew up. I don't know what it is. It's a certain magic about the place, I guess. I don't know. But we'll get home eventually. We'd like to get home before he goes into school.
Our goal is in 4 years, we're hoping.
We started out with a 3-month plan.
We came here for 3 months, so.
Only another 35 years.
And we're here 8 years now. Yeah, you tell them. Yeah.
The migrant workers dream that Newfoundland's own oil mega project will one day get up and running, allowing them to finally return home. In the middle of the North Sea, other international players are plotting their assault on Canada's tar sands. Stig Burseth is Senior Vice President with Norway's Statoil, Scandinavia's largest company. Statoil has managed to make money without compromising its social or environmental values. It's flush with cash from its North Sea reserves, but those reserves are finally declining.
You say declining, yes. I may argue that a little bit and say our ambition is to maintain the level that we currently are at. So we need to look abroad.
Traveling up the Athabasca River near Fort McMurray, Stig has over $2 billion to buy some pay dirt. He's just learned his company's oil fields in Venezuela have been expropriated by President Chavez, and Stig's desperate to secure a new foreign beachhead.
Canada offers an attractive and stable regime very different from most other places around the world where you can find oil and gas.
Looming over the riverbank is a rich outcrop of oil-soaked land. It's near an 1,100 square kilometer lease, held for the last 6 years by Calgary-based North American Oil Sands Corporation. Like many Canadian companies, they lack the billions needed to exploit the site. Money that Stig has in abundance.
My goodness, look at this.
Canada's loss is Norway's gain.
I'd just like to welcome you.
Okay.
Stig is here to inspect the land with a team of geologists, substantiating claims before buying in.
And you notice, of course, you're standing on oil sands. Everywhere you look is oil sand. It looks a little gray here, of course, because it weathers. But if you crack it open, you'll see this is oil sand. And of course, it's just sand that's saturated with bitumen.
This nugget of black gold is a sign of 2 billion barrels of recoverable oil that the Calgary leaseholder claims are trapped in their land.
This is just fabulous to see these rocks and these exposures in this setting, and I mean, this is on-the-job training.
What you're looking at here, I mean, this is a natural pavement, and it's slowly melting. And in fact, you can see that this could even be considered a liquid. You can see the flow, and you can put your imprint in it. On a very hot day, this becomes very, very soft. And once you dig it up, you can see how rich that is. That's about as rich oil sand as comes about naturally.
The size of the resource is enormous. And the day you can commercialize that resource, Canada will be sort of the second largest resource country in the world.
To become second only to Saudi Arabia, Canada seems content to allow companies like Statoil lead the way. Joining Norway, other foreigners flock to the tar sands. Chinese investors and scientists survey the land.
And this is where the center of universe for oil sand. All these are all the potential product that we can sell one day.
As a rising economic superpower, China craves oil and knows Canada is a rare open market. Rather than establish its own national oil company, Canada leases land to the highest bidder, making some wonder if foreigners drive tar sands development. Are Canadians just along for the ride?
I think it is a critical question. Do we have any sovereignty at all in terms of our energy sector? Because it is majority foreign owned. And interestingly, a lot of the companies involved now, and increasingly so, are national oil companies or publicly owned oil companies from nations that have chosen to maintain that sovereignty over their own resources, which is very ironic that Alberta and Canada haven't got that kind of public ownership in Alberta's oil sands at all. There's a big difference between being an energy colony and an energy superpower.
Everyone wants a piece of the tar sands. Yet Alberta continues to charge one of the lowest oil royalty rates in the world.
Albertans are trying to say, well, we just want to give this energy to you guys and sell it as quick as we can, and we're kind of in liquidation mode. And that's where we have not been very smart. And what the tar sands tell us every day, which we seem to neglect and forget every day, is that this is the end of the game. This is the last great source of oil on the planet. And you know what, guys? It's really dirty, it's really expensive, it comes with a huge environmental footprint. It takes approximately the energy equivalent of 1 barrel of oil to produce 2 barrels of oil in Fort McMurray. No civilization can survive long with that kind of ratio. And for Canadians not to recognize that, it's probably the greatest national folly that this country has ever been part of.
The tar sands may be having a profound effect on Canada's environment, but governments and corporate headquarters still seem to be moving full steam ahead.
Oh, Michael?
Sir.
Can we get a picture of you with the Premier?
Pushing the dream is the evangelist of heavy oil, Paul Michael Wiebe.
Premier, so nice to meet you, sir.
Here. Excellent. I'm looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
In town from Washington, D.C., Wiebe seduces newly elected Saskatchewan Premier Brad Wall to develop their own tar sands, like Alberta, satisfying American hunger for friendly oil.
The oil sands are the foundation of a new economic force that's transcending even Alberta. The world is in economic and political transition, and the global oil market reflects that.
Companies like G-West and individuals like Paul Michael Wiebe, they're there to make sure that rapid oil sands development proceeds rapidly. Their job is to talk it up. Their job is to advertise all the advantages. They're there to grease the wheels. And they do a good job of that.
Now, in our opinion, the center of gravity in the global oil market is shifting away from conventional light to this part of the world that we know as Western Canada. And the nexus of that epicenter lies essentially on the Saskatchewan-Alberta border. And this is where the Canadians become the pivot on the balance of power in the global oil market. And Washington and Beijing and Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, are all looking at you.
Wiebe's words echo north, across Saskatchewan's boreal forest. Saskatchewan has identified 1.5 billion barrels of oil trapped under a 2,800 square kilometer piece of land. They hope deep-pocketed Americans will come in and exploit their tar sands, transforming Saskatchewan into a mini Alberta. But be careful what you wish for. Across the border, the Alberta tar sands are an economic free-for-all, with an average of 10 exploration leases granted weekly for the last 5 years.
There was no national debate about how fast we should develop the tar sands. And we'll just let the marketplace kind of decide who gets what and how much that they get. And so we just opened the doors and then boom, the place exploded.
McMurray is a city that never sleeps. Clogging the roads is an army of workers that surround the town, living in camps or cars or flop houses, unable to afford McMurray's crippling rents. Transients lurk in the shadows, selling more drugs here than anywhere else in Alberta, juicing up workers for another day in the unforgiving boomtown.
Well, shifts are usually 7 to 7. But coming in the morning, it's, well, we're in the lineup at Tim's and you can see how busy it is. So, kind of says it all.
En route from his trailer home to work, Andy Rudick hits the drive-through early. Another morning in his 10 years up in the tar sands.
If you leave at 5, you can be there in 50 minutes. If you leave at 20 after 5, you're lucky if you're there at 7.
With over $1 billion invested here, there's lots of work to be done and money to be made. Andy will be welding 30-inch pipe, pumping tar sands oil to the U.S. market, and earning him a six-figure salary. But it can cost a fortune to live in McMurray, so Andy's left his family behind in Vegreville, 500 kilometers south. When you're stuck on site, it might as well be half a world away.
I work 20 days, I get 8 off. A lot of the guys that I've met are really good guys, so it makes it that much easier to be away from your family for 20 days. You spend more time with these guys than you do with your wife and your kids, so nobody really plans on being up here for 10 years. For the most part, it's a short-term fix. Every day you wonder, well, geez, another day, what am I doing? Every turnaround, that's another month gone that, you know, life's just slipping away.
Andy's lost track of how many thousands of sections of pipe he's welded over the last few years, helping feed the tar sands boom. Under Premier Ralph Klein, Alberta slashed royalties and handed out development permits to almost anyone who asked, living for today and letting tomorrow take care of itself.
We have energy to burn, so to speak, and we're willing to share.
There are now 6 massive tar sands projects developing at once, with another 24 waiting to gear up.
And there's repercussions when you build all those oil sands at the same time, and you're bringing people in from all over the world and trying to handle it. The pressure isn't just in Fort McMurray, it's right across the province.
There's this perception both inside and outside of Alberta that it's raining money. There's a large portion of Albertans that are actually worse off because of the incredible inflation that this province is experiencing. And that applies to the, the high homelessness rates. We have the highest number of working poor using food banks. And people on fixed incomes, they're not getting cost of living increases. So their incomes are actually falling at the height of a boom.
Slim pickings this time of year, boys.
Is this the only place in town?
Like all booms, the massive infusion of petrodollars has distorted the economy. In McMurray, even Christmas trees are in short supply.
Now that's a Christmas tree right there. You got to put that one in the corner.
Jeff and Gail Wiscombe are transplanted Newfoundlanders.
It's a laugh anyway. If he's all crooked, sky wish. Sky wish, that's a Newfie term, right?
They're looking for something money can't buy.
Start the car!
A bit of holiday cheer in this harsh economic climate.
Everything's relative, I guess. Money's really good, so anywhere you go where the money's really good, stuff goes up. It's kind of crazy in Fort McMurray. I guess it's probably number 2 next to Vancouver for real estate.
Fort McMurray is the fastest growing city in Canada, with the nation's highest salaries. But trailer homes here sell for over $400,000, making this boomtown feel like a money pit.
I got a nice mobile home in Morgan Heights. We kind of lovingly call it Mortgage Heights.
Here we go. This place has grown a lot since we've come here. When we first got here, we could go from one place to the next in 5 minutes. Now it takes you 2 to 3 hours.
Yeah, well. Look at that, too. Beautiful.
Aw, so pretty.
Oh,
how's it look so far?
Oh, Christmas tree. He's not bad for a rough guy.
Now it's probably a lot harder to find a place to buy that's affordable. Like a house, it's got to be over $600,000. And if you're just getting started and you're a young couple, I mean, who can get that kind of money, really?
Seeking one's fortune in McMurray can be a vicious game. The money attracts, but the cost of living can overwhelm, putting boom and bust on a collision course. Rallying behind the Oil Barons hockey team is a local pastime. But even victories may be short-lived.
It's a house being pulled apart from the seams. This is what booms do, particularly hydrocarbon booms. When you have people there only for the money, you don't have a community anymore. You've got a marketplace, but you don't have a community.
It wasn't supposed to be this way. Once called Alberta's blue-eyed chic, former Alberta Premier Peter Lougheed nurtured the tar sands for years. He carefully limited growth and raised royalty rates, establishing a heritage fund with the windfall.
We didn't think that the current generation, you and I, were entitled to take all that money and spend it. We thought some of it should be saved, so we set 30% of it aside each year and built the Heritage Fund, which when I left office, it was up into $12 billion.
Today, with the Heritage Fund no larger than when he left office 23 years ago, and development out of control, Lougheed worries his dream has become a nightmare.
The surface mining takes a huge bite out of the area. It's like stripping the topsoil off a farm. You do that and you've got to think about the future. People have to remember that the oil sands are owned by the people. They're not owned by the oil companies.
The tar sands boom travels across the province of Alberta, sounding a lonesome refrain. With husbands away at work in the tar sands, even nice family homes feel a bit empty, especially for Andy Riddick's wife, Tanine, 6 months pregnant with their 4th child.
Last year he was gone almost 9 months. And if you look through our pictures, you can see when we went on holidays together, that's kind of when he pops into the pictures. He misses out on a lot.
Andy's briefly home for Thanksgiving.
I had a dream that Mom had a baby, and its name was Angelica.
Well, you know it's probably going to be another girl. I really look forward to going home. My wife always enjoys it when I'm at home. Kids were ecstatic. My youngest daughter, she was born on Thanksgiving 7 years ago.
Thanks for us being clean? No, for us, me.
It's very challenging to be happily married when you're not together most of the time. It's hard enough being married when you're with each other all the time.
Same thing.
And it's, in effect, single parenting with a parent away.
Yellow ice.
Albertans coping with the downside of the boom may feel there's no way out. But as other countries show, alternatives do exist. Welcome to Norway's oil country. They do things differently here than in Alberta. Norway's ship came in when they discovered oil in the North Sea in 1969, changing their country forever. Stig Burstad has been with Statoil for 34 years and intimately understands the company's gospel of contained growth. Norway established the publicly owned oil company in 1972, controlling the nation's resource and reaping the benefits of the boom. Stig returns from Alberta on a mission to buy into the tar sands. Statoil can afford to expand abroad. Instead of cashing in their oil lottery winnings, they invested in Norway's future.
One thing that was concerning us, that a country could get too much money and destroy its economy. And as you know, some years ago, we had a decision in the parliament to establish this oil fund, or what is now called the pension fund, so that most of the money coming in from the oil activity is kept outside the natural economy of Norway.
Rather than bust out, Norway matured gracefully. It's quietly grown into the world's 2nd wealthiest country, and little Norway's oil fund is $380 billion, ensuring their progressive society will flourish for generations.
I'm not going to give you an advice to Alberta unless they come and ask for it. But in my experience, you cannot have resources of this size and have a successful development unless you have a good combination of public control and private enterprise. And then, of course, if you consume it as it is being produced, you are doomed to failure.
By taxing carbon pollution, oil companies in Norway have been compelled to invest in research. Statoil's perfected a method to capture and store carbon, reducing emissions by 65% and annually sequestering 1 million tons of CO2 in their Sleipner platform.
1 million tons is a lot of carbon dioxide, and one way of illustrating it would be to say that it's more or less equivalent to the emissions from 300,000 cars on the roads.
The pressure will be on from Norwegians to adapt this technology to work in Alberta's tar sands, the site of Statoil's future.
It will be the largest and the single one most important project in Statoil's portfolio for the next decade.
Stig finalizes plans for Norway to get a piece of the tar sands. Is it yet another foreign invasion, or a friendly reminder that there's a different way to play the oil game?
When you look at the Norwegian experience now and you look at the Alberta experience, you know, we would have benefited had we just moved a little bit towards the Norwegian experience, but we didn't, and we still haven't.
While the price of oil has increased 400%, royalties paid by big oil to the Alberta government have decreased from roughly $3 to $2 a barrel. Albertans, like welder Andy Riddick's wife Tanine, are starting to ask if they're getting a fair share.
The royalties haven't been reflective of the vast amounts of money that the big oil and gas companies have been making for years. This is a very complicated issue that a lot of people don't have the time or the energy to try to find out all the details about, and that's where we look for a premier or a government to lead us in the right direction.
Higher royalties means more cash for the province, but Tanine is torn. Her husband Andy works in the tar sands, and big oil threatens massive layoffs if anything changes.
Each of you will be asked to provide 3 to 4 minutes.
Some Albertans, though, worry about the price of prosperity and hotly debate the development of the tar sands.
Nothing, and most countries are doing
At stake, the future of the province.
And so I fear for our industry. We're Albertans too. I'm an Albertan. Our 500 employees are Albertan. When oil's worth something, everybody tends to talk in the first person possessive, mine, ours, and share. And when the price goes down, those of us in the industry are left to fend for ourselves.
Globally, most of the world's oil is off limits to private for-profit multinational companies. So there's only 6% of the world's oil that those companies can get access to. Half of that is in Canada. And the other half is in high political risk jurisdictions with high exploration costs as conventional oil peaks, and they have to look harder and harder to find it. Given that context, we could afford to be in the higher range comparatively with other jurisdictions for royalties and taxes instead of the bottom range.
Just to remind you, there's a whole industry out there worldwide trying to replace hydrocarbons as a transportation fuel. So I don't know how long you want to save it. You might wake up one day and discover it's not worth anything. The other aspect is the idea of the government plotting our economic future. And I don't know. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm not going to kid you. And when I think down the road, when oil runs out, I doubt I'll be looking to the Alberta government for what to do next, because when we run out of oil, nobody's going to know what to do.
The livelihood of Tanine and her husband Andy are directly dependent on the oil boom. Like many Albertans, they may worry about the future, but they must live for today. Change seems a luxury they can't afford. But as Newfoundland shows, it's possible to stand up to big oil, even if you're a have-not province.
I negotiate as Newfoundland and Labrador as the center of the universe. And that's the principle from which I operate. I don't care if ExxonMobil are dealing all over the world. As Premier, I'm looking out for the interests of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians.
In 1997, Newfoundland started fishing for oil on the Grand Banks. And when ExxonMobil wanted to develop another offshore project, Premier Williams demanded an ownership stake and higher royalties.
I was heavily criticized right across this country from coast to coast to coast, referred to as Hugo Chavez. But, we just stayed the course. I wasn't prepared to just give it away.
Big Oil walked away from the table, certain that Newfoundland, desperate for work, would fold. But 17 months later, they accepted Premier Williams' terms.
Why should Canadians be second-class citizens, and why should we take less? And that's been my philosophy. And as soon as I was aware of it, I said, no, we're gonna dig in here, and we'll wait. The asset is in the ground, and it's not going anywhere.
Doing it Premier William's way demands patience, and Newfoundlanders are in it for the long haul.
We are all bound away.
Like welder Jeff Wiscombe, they perfect their skills in places such as Fort McMurray, counting the days till they can return home.
I guess the longer you stay away, the easier it is to let go of your roots. But most people, I would venture to say, if I was a betting man, I would say 3/4 of them are planning on coming home eventually.
In the meantime, Newfoundlanders make one of the longest commutes in the world, a direct flight from the rock to the sands. Or, as some say, from heaven to hell in just 6 hours flat.
We are all bound away.
I see the families kissing goodbye. You see them at the airport, the children waving goodbye to Dad. And I feel it. I feel it in my gut. I feel it in my heart. And my way of dealing with that is to try and get the employment as soon as possible in order to get them home.
Shall there be smooth sailing?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This will be a general boarding call for the Alberta Enterprise Group Charter Flight 7000 with service to Washington.
Alberta's largest trade delegation ever is departing on a 3-day mission to Washington, D.C.
Do you want me to call you before we get our bags or after we get our bags?
Some of these investors rescued the Edmonton Oilers when the franchise was ready to abandon hockey's heartland and move to Houston.
You know, the truth of the matter is it's a very high-quality product.
Now they hope to ink some TarSands deals and are bringing along former Premier Ralph Klein's 90-year-old father for moral support.
Don't drink too much red wine.
Well,
you're not making that promise, right?
Not really.
No, okay.
Among the 100-member delegation are the province's business elite, heading companies that employ over 30,000 Albertans and annually gross several $billions, much of it in the tar sands.
We have put ourselves on track to becoming almost Saudi Canada. The blue-eyed sheiks in the north who will serve their masters in the south. You guys get the oil and we get all the environmental freak shows up here. And the Americans are saying, God, we're so lucky to have friends like the Albertans.
The group awaits tomorrow's arrival of Alberta Premier Ed Stelmach, eager to show the Americans a united front.
Welcome to Washington, D.C.
And Paul Michael Wiebe waits in the wings, here to help usher in a new energy alliance.
AEG, and as well as the Premier and his staff. It'll be good for Alberta, it'll be good for Canada, and certainly for the United States.
Despite the warm welcome, Alberta's coming out party is in jeopardy. Down the street, American environmentalists protest against the tar sands, trying to quiet concerns about climate change. President Bush passed an energy bill a month earlier, prohibiting the U.S. military and postal service from buying dirty oil.
To me, it says that Alberta is ground zero for global warming.
Canada's soil, not for oil!
These pieces of legislation are coming up because of people's growing awareness of climate change, of the threat that climate change represents to all of us, and it's not going to go away anytime soon. So it's a problem for the industry in Alberta, without a doubt.
Oil! No Canada! No Canada! Keep your dirty oil! No Canada! No Canada! Keep your dirty oil!
Environmentalists stir up debate, from the streets of Washington to the backwoods of Alberta. Canadians and Americans team up in a rebel alliance, mobilizing against the most environmentally destructive project on Earth. Processing 1 barrel of tar sands oil requires 3 barrels of water, leaving behind toxic sludge that's stored in massive tailing ponds, slowly leaching into the watershed. Alberta-born Greenpeace activist Mike Hudima learned protest tactics in the U.S. But after seeing up close the world's largest greenhouse gas emitter, he moves home to lead an aggressive frontline campaign.
The message? Simple. The way it's delivered? Risky. On the first day of the fall session, Greenpeace picks a dramatic view from the legislature to get noticed.
And what we're saying is it's time to stand up to big oil. It's time to say no to big oil, no to the U.S., and yes to a green energy future that our children can live with.
If the environmental movement manages to push Americans to get really tough on dirty oil, Alberta will desperately need to find another buyer. Lucky for them, a new superpower has a nearly insatiable thirst for energy. With the world's largest market and fastest growing economy, the only thing that seems capable of slowing down China is their lack of oil. By 2010, China will overtake America as the world's biggest energy consumer. For years, they've been trying to push their way into the tar sands game, betting Alberta can rescue their oil-starved economy. Ken Chung is a Chinese-Canadian who was a scientist with Syncrude, the biggest tar sands player. Now he's working with the Chinese government. So important is oil to China, they established a University of Petroleum, annually churning out 7,000 graduates, many with expertise in the tar sands.
China takes education very seriously and energy security very seriously, so they're willing to pour big money at it. China has coal, has a bit of oil, it's not too good of an oil, has very little natural gas, so there is this huge drive of this society to find a solution for that problem.
Shung's a scientific genius, renowned for developing cheaper ways to process tar sands crude, and the university is his research base camp.
On the campus here, you have a oil production facility, as well refinery for the student to perform their apprenticeship.
Shung is experimenting with a cutting-edge chemical process to refine tar sands oil. If it works, tar sands companies won't need to build costly upgraders to sweeten the crude. Shung's confident his technology could save billions of dollars, enticing potential foreign investors.
This is the typical gas oil material we get from the bitumen upgrader from Fort McMurray.
Shell's Alexander Vandermatte is always looking for the next best thing and likes what he sees.
Given the amount of resources they're pouring at it, sooner or later they must be able to succeed. But I would say it's a fast-ticking clock. This society is still accelerating. More and more cars are getting on the road. And I've got a feeling if they make it, it's going to be a really narrow escape.
A lot of people seem to be very scared about changes. But on the other hand, Chinese just love to have changes. Chinese just love the crisis. And Chinese always believe it's the crisis that will make a big difference. This is where you're going to make prosperity.
The entry point may be Shung's technology. But China's ultimate goal is to own a piece of the tar sands and build a Rocky Mountain pipeline to the Pacific. But not all welcomed them, fearing an aggressive competitor on America's doorstep.
I don't think the Americans want the Chinese to hone in on what for them is a secure source of oil. And I think the Canadians are divided about it. I think some would say, well, geez, two markets make sense. We might be able to get a better price for our product. Why not? And others are thinking, well, if we globalize the resource, then we'll liquidate this resource much more quickly than we ever thought. And I think there'll be a big fight about that.
Canadians can debate among themselves, but the fate of the tar sands will be determined elsewhere. America is the main developer and buyer of tar sands oil. Over 55% of all capital invested in the tar sands is American, and nearly 3/4 of the crude is exported stateside. It may be Canadian soil, but it's America's call.
Fred, how are you doing? Good. Where are
Hi
you now?
there. This is Tim calling again from the Alberta Enterprise Group.
Okay.
How are you doing?
Organizers sort out last-minute details for Alberta Premier Ed Stelmach's historic trip to Washington.
We have set the stage for our premier.
Yep.
We have given him the platform, and now it's up to him to deliver.
Team Alberta is anxious about a recent bill prohibiting U.S. federal agencies from using dirty oil. Here for damage control, Premier Stelmach's desperate to convince Americans that tar sands oil is secure and clean. Washington-based heavy oil promoter Paul Michael Wiebe watches from the sidelines and hopes Alberta rises to the challenge.
Canadians have a lot to learn from the American experience. Americans are not afraid of taking a risk. They seek challenge. They are not afraid of failure.
The room's buzzing, wondering whether Premier Stelmach can win back America. He's no spellbinding speaker, but he has a trump card: China.
Now, there's a myth out there that oil sands production comes at a too high an environmental cost. And the myth has gained some traction here in the United States. There are ongoing attempts in some quarters of this country, and of course in ours, to slow down or even stop oil sands production. These attempts don't really reflect reality. Even worse, they could serve to jeopardize this country's energy security at a time when Asian markets are clamoring for oil.
Stelmach bets the U.S. will never allow China into its backyard. Shortly after his speech, the U.S. government says tar sands oil is clean enough for them, proving security trumps environment, at least for now. Alberta's market is safe, and America's energy is secure for the next century.
It's in this nation's interest to trade with Canada. It's in, I think, the Canadian interest to trade with the United States. I'll let the Prime Minister speak to that.
But there's still someone out in the cold: the rest of Canada.
Prime Minister Harper calls Canada an energy superpower, but what we're doing is exporting oil and gas to the United States, and we have no plans to bring in oil and gas for Eastern Canadians. We would be letting them freeze in an international energy crisis.
The main pipelines carrying tar sands crude all point south, feeding the U.S. What's missing is a pipeline to Eastern Canada, leaving them to get their oil from insecure places like Iraq, Algeria, and Venezuela.
We, in fact, are the most insecure country in the International Energy Agency, even though we have all of this oil and gas.
While Canada's energy supply is unstable, Norway's future seems secure. Stig Burseth surveys Statoil's newly acquired piece of the tar sands, confident he can extract oil without open pit mining.
And they send it into the main plant there.
Pang Shan remains on the outside, still looking for a chance to get China into the tar sands game.
You know, the conveyor belt. Then you set it.
Newfoundland welder Jeff Wiscombe is stranded in Fort McMurray for yet another year. His family dreams of returning home, and perhaps Newfoundland's Premier, Danny Williams, will help him get there.
Going on Wednesday?
But why do you have to?
Well, because I have to.
After 10 long years in the tar sands, welder Andy Ruddick decides the boom comes at too high a price. He's now taken a job closer to home, reuniting his family.
Did you?
As the Oilers prepare to do battle with the Capitals, there's lots of excitement in the air. Paul Michael Wiebe's here to soak it all up, his matchmaking finally done. Team Alberta celebrates their apparent victory in Washington. But some think they've been played by the Americans, too quick to give it away.
I think we should be more blunt and more straightforward with the Americans, that our development of the oil sands is going to be orderly and it's going to be to our benefit. Because I keep reading in the American media somehow that their whole energy problem is going to be solved by the Alberta Canadian oil sands. And that's not a good thing for our country.
Oh, Canada, our home and native.
In the tar sands game, there are inevitably winners and losers.
The boreal forest is a loser. Water users in Alberta are losers. And democracy itself is a loser in not just in Alberta, but also in Canada. Because the more a nation becomes dependent on a single resource, such as oil, the less democratic it comes over time. Oil begins to make the decisions. You introduce these incredible political imbalances to the system that slowly and incrementally change the very character of your democracy.
Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.